Thank you. Thanks, Matthew and Amber. I'm excited to be here, and I think particularly because I think the audience could be maybe half students and half people out there doing design research. So that's particularly, I'm very pleased with that. Let me go right to, wait, where's the clicker? Oh, thank you. Let me go right to the table of contents. What I'm going to do is start with some patterns to talk about the blurring of boundaries and changes that are appearing. And then I'll take you through a map of design practice and design research, which starts after the First World War and continues to today. Then what I'm going to do is make some, I don't want to say predictions, but present some pictures of where things are heading. Collective creativity will be lots and lots of pictures of what this looks like in practice. I'll probably be going through that very quickly, and then propose a new hypothesis that's about discovery, and propose some future challenges as well. Design and research are blurring at the front end of the design process, and I see that it's a time of disruption and confusion, and it's also very exciting. So here's a picture of the design process, which starts out kind of messy and confusing, and you're kind of going a lot of different directions. Ultimately, then it focuses in on something to the point where at the end it becomes very linear, and things hopefully come out done at the end. The part of the design process that I'll be talking about is this front end, which basically has been growing and getting messier and messier over the past, I'd say, 10 to 15 years. And what's going on here now, it's not clear in a sense if it's research or if it's design. So some of the changes I've noted, having been doing this for over 25 years now, is we're seeing that the roles people play in the design process are changing, and we see that when we look at the language that we use to describe those people that we serve through design. Whoops, sorry about the number at the bottom. So in the early 80s, it was just customers and consumers. When PCs came into being, the word user became very popular because we couldn't use them. And as it evolved, you'll see that the name that we use to refer to the people that we're serving has changed and become more and more proactive. And so you can think of this hill of change and see that it's been moving over the last 25 years from an expert-driven approach through a user-centered approach, and now quite a lot of discussion, excitement, and action around this term called co-creation. One thing the diagram tries to do is to imply that expert-driven is not going away, user-centered is not going away. The new things don't replace the old things, they all become relevant, and what we need to do is to figure out what to do when. I'll be talking about this end, standing at the red dot, looking at the design process, and when I'm talking about co-creation, this is where I'm standing. I'm talking about the co-creation of the idea or the intent of what it is to design. So standing at the red dot, you don't know what you're designing yet. There's a lot of discussion about co-creation standing at the other end of the process on the red dot on the right. And I think there's even more discussion here than the earlier dot. So I do a Google search on co-creation, so I kind of see what's happening. A lot of co-creation is being discussed more from a marketing mindset. And the quote here exemplifies that approach to co-creation. Co-creation is a new and innovative marketing mantra intended to keep consumers brand loyal. Okay, I'm not talking about that part of co-creation, although it exists, it's relevant. What I'll be doing instead when I use co-creation is looking at it from the human-centered point of view. So I just wanted to make that clear. There is a lot of confusion going on. Okay, so we're looking here at the messy front end. I'll show you a map. This is sort of where I go back in time and build a map of design research and design practice as it's been evolving over the last, I guess it's almost 50 years now. And the map is a global map, and it looks at what's happening not just in the US, but what's happening all over the world. The dimensions of the map are, if you stand at the map, if you stand at the bottom and look up, you'll be looking at things that are driven from a research-led perspective. That means probably led by researchers, people trained in research, with all of the mindset that comes with that. If you stand at the top and look at the map from the other perspective, there'll be design-led approaches to design research. So this would be using design thinking or design training and being involved in the process from that point of view. The left and the right dimensions are also different. If you stand on the left, you'll see the things emerging on the map that come from an expert mindset. Okay, so in the expert mindset, we design for people because we are the experts who understand maybe how people think or how their bodies move or whatever. The people tend to be referred to as, say, subjects or participants in this case. So we're the experts, we're designing for them. On the right-hand side of the map is the participatory mindset, which is very, very different. From the participatory mindset, there's an attitude that the people that we're serving through design and design research are a part of that process as partners in the process. So we're not really designing for them. I mean, we are designing with them, and they are the ultimate recipients. But the participatory mindset implies that they are part of that process. Human factors and ergonomics is the first big bubble on the map, and it hangs right off the research-led, expert-driven corner. And this is after the Second World War. The field started emerging as the need arose to explain why planes were crashing and working out ways to develop man-machine systems and so forth better. User-centered design emanated from that core area. So user-centered design is much broader, but still it does carry with it this research-led expert mindset perspective. Meanwhile, in Scandinavia, now why is that funny? In Scandinavia, at the same time, a different approach with the participatory mindset is emerging. And all this is going on before the internet is starting to connect us. It is somewhat more research-led, but the mindset is if people are going to be using this new information technology that we're going to put into their workplace, then it's fairly obvious that they need to be involved in that change transformation, which was the approach taken there. A large field called participatory design then grew from that core, spanning the research-led and the design-led perspectives, but not a lot of overlap between the two. Usability testing, applied ethnography, lead user innovation. This is Eric von Hippel's approach of using lead users as participants in the process, it starts to cross the two. I don't put it in the participatory design bubble because I think it's like the low-hanging fruit of participatory design, in that only lead users can be participants, but not the rest of us. Contextual inquiry, I mean, we could put lots and lots of bubbles on here. I'm not putting all of them, I'm just trying to kind of stake the ground. In 1999 was the first Design and Emotion conference. It was held in the Netherlands, and from what I could tell, this was the first time really, it was an international conference. It was practitioners and academicians. It included designers doing research and researchers doing research as well. So it's sort of, and it marked the introduction of this new domain of design and emotion. Critical design is an approach coming out of the Royal College of Art in the UK, and it was originally intended as a challenge to user-centered design. The authors of this movement claimed that user-centered design is affirmative design. What it does is it just improves and tweaks the way things are. It just makes things a little tiny bit better, but it never really challenges the status quo. So critical design made it a point of challenging that status quo. And one of the examples from a book called Design Noir is they would create provocative objects and put them in the homes of people and ask the people to live with these objects, and they'd come back and understand what happened, what relationship emerged there. Probes is a very, very popular approach in Europe that's emanated from the critical design perspective. Critical design is design-led, but from an expert mindset. The designers are the experts, and they're probing and producing these provocative objects as a form of learning and inspiration for the design process. In the other corner, generative tools is also a challenge to user-centered design. Okay. But instead of provoking design by building things to inspire designers, this approach uses designerly tools to do research, to, in this case, bring people into the design process at the very beginning. Okay, and so this is the corner that I call generative design research, and I'm working more in that area than in any of the other areas on the map, and so my examples will come from there. One point that I want to make about the map is there's not a good and a bad. Every section of the map is relevant. The key is to figure out where you are, where you do your best work, and where you need to be at different stages in the design process. So there is definitely some areas of the map are more relevant than others for certain things. Co-designing teams are now expanding to include all the relevant stakeholders, particularly in the front end of the process. We see this particularly on design challenges of large scale and complexity. About 4 or 5 years ago, I left the world of industrial design, interaction design, and started working with architects and planners. And so a lot of what we're doing is designing new healthcare systems and hospitals. So that's what I mean by scale and complexity. We're also seeing new design disciplines or movements, so to speak, emerge. And so you can compare sort of the old design disciplines, which are the ones that most schools typically organize their curricula around. And over on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's new areas emerging. The old disciplines focused more on sort of what it was that was being made, the product of design. The new ones being more focused on the purpose or the outcome or the intent of design. So we see all these patterns kind of point to the fact that design is taking on increasingly collective forms. And the new domains of collective creativity require new tools and methods for designing and for researching. And so here is, I'll just show you examples of what this looks like in practice. And you'll see here that these make tools or these generative tools are being used by groups of people. And so this map has been made by an entire team, and then he's presenting the results of a collaborative effort made up of 12 to 15 people, all from different parts of a hospital. Again, using the tools to bring people together to use the same language before the design process begins. So you see the making and the storytelling. A lot of, when you do work with hospitals, you tend to be conducting the sessions in the break room of the hospital. Here, three-dimensional exploration in mobile healthcare technology in Finland, where we were able to put teams together, university people, hospital people, and consultants, not only creating devices for the future, but play acting in actual environments of use. So the tools are being used at a group level. Small groups, these are nurses mapping out workflow, and these are some of the artifacts of the collective thinking. This is a new toolkit. We call it the dollhouse. And what we've seen is that in this example, these three nurses haven't worked together, but in 12 minutes were able to make all the design decisions that you see here. Again, other views on the collective creativity. Some of the nurses didn't want to focus on the patient room. The toolkit let them focus elsewhere. Even usability testing is a collective creativity activity. So this is usability testing of a new room, running real scenarios with real equipment and real nurses in a room that's mocked up at that level. What I want to do now is present a hypothesis. I have not shown this before. It may be a little bit rough, but I'm saying, well, let's take another look at what's going on in that messy front end. And I'm proposing that maybe we shouldn't argue about is it design or is it research, but let's call it discovery. And let's take the two dimensions we used earlier, the research-led perspective and the design-led perspective. Let's put those on this map. But let's propose that there's two kinds of discovery that's going on in the front end. And one kind of discovery is exploration. The other kind is research. And I'm defining those to make it clear, because I think people have their own definitions of these terms. Exploration would be serendipitous, opportunistic, open-ended, and future-oriented. So you're out there, you're learning, you're going places, you're not really sure what you're going to find in exploration. And a lot of the front end is like that. Research is more systematic, rigorous, structured, and seeking knowledge more so than future-oriented. So if you cross those two dimensions, it becomes clear that regular, design-led exploration, this is what designers do. This is what they're trained to do. This is what the pre-design phase is from a designer's perspective. It's design exploration, and designers are very, very good at that. The research-led research is, I'm just calling it, that's real research. And I think you can see here that there's this, they take very different places in this model. And I hear a lot of talk these days about the gap between research and design. And you see the gap here on this model, but I want to propose that there's other cells that are emerging in the model that will begin well, they're already emerging and they're already beginning to close this gap between research and design and to define new areas of exploration. So we have design-led research and some of the examples I proposed from the top of the map. So we have research that's using design thinking to do research. And we also have exploration being done from a research-led point of view, although this is more rare. Although I'm beginning to see instances of it in practice. And once you start to stop worrying about who's in what quadrant and start deliberately crossing those boundaries or feeding from one into the other, I think we'll see that the blur between research and design will start to become more clear, redefine itself, and we won't be worried so much about the gap. What I'm doing now in practice is I'm working with an architectural firm called NBBJ, and I'm also working with Phillips Plastics Corporation. And between those two companies, I have an opportunity to work simultaneously in the two cells that have the two cells with the smallest type. In the future, designers and researchers will learn to use their own creativity to amplify the creativity of other people. So I mean designers and researchers working collectively will be doing this. And these designers and researchers working together then will be creating scaffolds that everyday people will use to express their creativity. And then the final slide is what happens on this hill of change, or what's beyond co-creation. And these are some thoughts about where it's going. Again, keeping in mind that nothing ever falls away or becomes irrelevant, but things keep going. So I sort of see where, we're now moving away, or the designing stuff era kind of connects us to the earlier pathway. And we're moving into domains of co-experiencing, collective generativity, collective creativity at the front end of the process, looking not only at ideas, but delivering upon large, complex intent issues of, say, health, welfare, and so forth. And ultimately then cultural sustainability as another level in this progression. And that's what I have. So I think I have plenty of time for questions because I was talking so fast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my name is Victor Margolin, and I'm in sort of loosely the design research community, but not as a designer. I wanted to just ask some questions. I wanted to ask some questions about this use of the term research. For example, you're presenting it as, it seems to me, related to particular projects in the sense that one does a certain kind of exploration in order to figure out what to design. But most fields also use the term research independent of practices. For example, the idea that cell phones might, induce more brain tumors is a kind of research that might eventually feed back into cell phone design, but it's something done. So my question is, the reason I'm asking the question is because there's a huge problem in the field of design research if you just follow the PhD design list. I mean, nobody knows what it is or what to do with it. And so I want to address this issue of, get your take on how one ought to be using the term in the wider field. I mean, if research on the one hand means something quite pragmatic related to a particular outcome, what do we then call other kinds of investigation that are much broader and generalized, that may feed back on particular work, but in a very different way?
Well, I'm proposing that we use discovery or something like discovery, because you're right, the PhD list right now, they're arguing again as we speak about design as research, research as design. So what I'm trying to do in the hypothesis is say, discovery is discovery, research is research. They're both relevant. Yes, designers are in the discovery process. You know what I mean? So we're just trying to broaden that. I don't know that that's the right term, but I think the idea is the purpose is discover, hopefully something new and innovative and relevant that will make people's lives better. So I'm saying pick a bigger category and let's look at where things are and where there's opportunity to grow it.
No, I think that's a better term because research really it can be so many things that are much bigger than leading to a particular pragmatic outcome.
Exactly. Well, and then it's discovery for design development. So I'm not talking about basic research, but basic research fits, I think, in that discovery bubble as well, because a lot of times it does lead to ideas that are relevant. Yeah, so I've been reading the argument, as I'm preparing for this. Yes. There was one up there. Okay.
Yeah, I thought my question was going to be philosophical until that one was asked. Is there a meaningful distinction between design-led research and designer-led research, particularly because a lot of people are multidisciplinary and designers are doing research and researchers are doing design? So why continue that distinction?
But wait, so what's the question? Is there a difference between designer-led research and design-led research?
I guess that's the first part.
Well, the first, I'm a researcher, but I use a design-led approach now. I used to use a research-led approach. So no, I don't think you have to be a designer to use a design-led approach.
Okay. So
okay, but what was the second question?
Why I feel like those distinctions are traditional, and maybe those are even, what's the research and what's design? I mean, I guess that's the whole context. What a researcher does now might be something that a designer did 20 years ago.
Right.
So do you feel that that distinction is still going to remain?
I think the distinction is good because it helps people see where they are and see where other people are. It helps people orient in the domain. So I'm not sure if it will remain in the future. It probably will change. Like the first map with the bubbles was done 2 years ago. Okay? The hypothesis at the end was done this week. So I think, yeah, things are going to change, but the map is useful. I've seen it be useful, say, with students, figuring out where they are and where they want to travel. And so I'll probably, keep it for that reason, for orienting. And hopefully for people to add stuff too.
I was curious to know, in the hospital example, when you had the nurses playing with the dollhouse and reconfiguring the space, what process does it go through from there then to turn into tangible design? Like the interaction with the design team and the architects. I was just curious to know sort of how those iterations change and what process they go through before they're actually constructed.
In this case, we were able to get the design team involved with us in planning the research, making the dollhouse, shooting the video. The design team was involved through the entire process. And so in that case, it was internalized, and they then used it in their continuing design effort. An interesting thing we found out was, and we're hearing this a lot with architects and interior space designers, what this research really, really helps them do is focus in on the good ideas. They have lots of ideas. They have hundreds and hundreds of ideas because they work in healthcare year in and year out. What it helps them to do is to recognize which are the relevant ideas. So it helps them focus, which is sort of, I didn't really anticipate that, but if all you do is hospital design, you never have, there's always ideas, but you don't know which ones to focus on to put the money on.
I've been familiar with some of dollhouse, I just wondered what kinds of differences you're finding when you have a team participating, co-creating, using kind of 3D figures as opposed to the 2D set of tools that you've used previously.
Well, we do have 2D space toolkits as well. I think with the 3D, they come to an idea together much faster and much more easily because, you know what I mean, you can see it. And the walls are clear, so I was just shocked how quickly those three could agree, having never worked together, what that room needed to be. So I think it's speed, relevance, and it's just easier and fun for them. Although it's much, much harder to travel with.
Is it more applicable to, you say you're working with architects and environment planners? Is that part of the reason that you've gone to the 3D? It's just more in their kind of realm?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, since going into architecture and planning, all the tools have changed somewhat. And the point I tried to make too is we do way more with groups. Okay, in industrial design or consumer product land, it was more individuals did collages, individuals did toolkits. Now we have these massive bullseyes and tables full of things. We deal with groups of anywhere from 3 to 20, simultaneously, collectively working together and negotiating what goes on, what gets put in the bullseye. So stuff's really big and messy.
You were saying that all the methods within that box are applicable at different scenarios in the life cycle. How do you, what factors do you use to play in the tail on the box?
Wait, what?
What factors do you use to play in the tail on the box? As in, what factors go into the decision of this is the best research method or design method to use at this stage?
I mean, I guess I've worked in all the parts of the map, so I would just, I have a lot of past experience. I'm trying to get back to it in understanding that. But I think that generally the top part of the map is where you start. If you're generating ideas or you're exploring an area, you probably want to be on the top of that map. Now, if you're exploring an area and you don't have a clue what you're doing, then you might want to do some applied ethnography first and then go up to the top of the map. Okay? But generally, the early part is more towards the upper part of the map, and as you are developing testing concepts, doing usability testing, getting it ready to go out the door, you're working in the lower areas of the map, just as an overall kind of a thing. So I think the key is to know where you need to be on the map, as opposed to arguing which part of the map is better. Mm-hmm.
Did you include sick people in your group, or families of sick people to?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we are able to, we've done research. It takes about 3 months to get permission, but we have been able to have people do participatory sessions in the hospital bed with their permission. And so we keep them short, a lot of flexibility, able to spread out on their stomach or whatever.
Did you do follow-up after that? So them coming out of the hospital and then referring back to their situation?
No. We'd love to do that. It's an issue of time and cost. But we had a case where we had a team of people. Some people were shadowing physicians, nurses, surgeons, and so forth. I had patients and their family members and had permission to photograph and shadow them through the entire process of surgery. But like I said, it took 3 months to get permission to do that, even though the company I was with was designing the new hospital and had lots of connections. It was still, it was a difficult thing to do, but definitely worth it. Mm-hmm.
Steve Krug's book, Don't Make Me Think, has a funny graphic in it where where the usability professional is asked by the client, we'd like you to do a usability focus group, and he has a question mark above his head because there isn't usability focus groups, right? Usability study means to observe the individual using some research techniques, and focus studies are consensus generating systems for conversing with people. So what I'm fascinated with the map is it helps to locate things, but it doesn't give us an indication of what the end product result is out of these things. You're saying that it's not a normative map. We shouldn't be arguing about what's better or worse, but clearly the results of these kinds of research processes are quite different.
Well, that would be a good layer to make on the map. And I think there's lots of things that could be on the map that aren't. And in fact, what I've seen is the top of the map is filling up now. Particularly, I think the European design research situation, in my opinion, is way more active and innovative, and there's quite a lot of really, really good stuff going on in between probes and generative tools, for example. I mean, that would be useful to do, but I haven't done it.
Does this body of knowledge constitute a new profession in the sense that one would have degrees in design, an MA in design research that everybody would understand so that one could go out and work with a group like this? I mean, in the past we've had anthropologists, psychologists, human factors experts, and so forth kind of developing techniques and joining design firms. But I'm wondering whether there's a body of material that constitutes a particular kind of practice that merits degrees and so forth.
I would think there would be, but I wouldn't want to keep people who don't have that degree from being on that team. You know?
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is it, I mean, would you say to somebody, well, take a degree in psychology and then jump into the field, or get an MBA, or get a whatever, PhD in design, and then jump in and, you know, of course, absorb what you can and figure it out? Is that how this is all developed, and do you think it ought to just keep developing that way?
Well, in Europe, they are developing programs around human-centered research at master's and PhD levels. So it's already starting, although there's a lot more governmental funding to do that kind of a thing. So I think it's already, starting to happen. And yeah, I'm not sure how long it would take before it's a field. But I just would hate for, you know, really creative designers to be excluded from the game because they have a design degree or they don't have an advanced degree, which I also see being an issue, which is a shame.